There is no greater honor for anyone in baseball than being elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Since its creation in 1936, the Hall has inducted 346 individuals. Of this number, only 11 have been lawyers. This book celebrates the unique group, which consists of three players: Hughie Jennings, Jim O'Rourke, and Monte Ward, two managers, Miller Huggins and Tony La Russa, and three executives, Larry MacPhail, Walter O'Malley, Branch Rickey, and three commissioners, Happy Chandler, Bowie Kuhn, and Kenesaw Mountain Landis. Each inductee is a subject of a detailed essay that recounts their legal education, admission to the bar, and legal career. Edited by Robert M. Jarvis, and our guest, a SABR member and a Miami Marlins season ticket holder, the Honorable Louis H. Schiff. Welcome to Baseball and BBQ, Louis.
Welcome,
Jeff,
Lou.
Leonard, thanks. Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here. It's a good day. Any day to talk baseball is a good day.
It
And,
definitely
and the
is.
Marlins are tied for first place right now. So, and I, on behalf of all seven season ticket holders, I apologize for that last game or the last couple of games down in Miami, gentlemen. It
you,
Let,
just
you
let,
know,
it is what it is.
you're
let, let,
obviously a glass half full kind of person because you could also say they're also tied for last place in every
Well, but
place.
that goes without saying. Okay, that kind of that just goes without saying when you're a Marlins fan.
Uh,
It's
uh,
it's similar to being a Mets fan, except you have the better owner.
uh,
That's the truth.
Before we start, Leonard, with the questions, let me just tell you the name of the book. It's Attorneys in Baseball Hall of Fame, a collection of biographical essays.
There it is.
Yeah, there it is.
there we
McFarland.
go. It's Lewis. Every time I think that there can't be another book written about a different subject in baseball, I am proven wrong, and I love that I'm proven wrong.
Uh-huh.
And it's not hard to do that, but I love the fact that you thought of this subject and you came up these biographical essays on all of these people who you don't concentrate as much on their baseball careers, although that's part of it, but the fact that they were all lawyers and how that contributes to them as people. Now, like Jeff said, I mean, there's many in this book. We chose to focus for purposes of this interview on three specifically, but we'll mention some of the others as well. But John Montgomery Ward, Bowie Kuhn, and Tony La Russa. So, but then we'll get to some of the others as well. So let's start with the player that Jeff and I we think he's just from the time we went to the Hall of Fame. We went together. It was a day in January. It was empty, and we were looking at every plaque, and we see this guy, John Montgomery Ward. He is credited with pitching victories, a lot of them, a lot of hits. I mean,
Mhm.
he was a and he pitched and he played the field as well. Although I don't know that he did it at the same time. I think he was a pitcher first, and then when his pitching career was ending, that's when he started playing the field. But either case, we became enamored with this guy, learned more about him, even visited his grave on Long Island.
Wow.
And so let's
Stalking
talk.
stalking him in
Yeah,
his later
yes.
years. Is that it? Wow. Don't tell
So
his family.
let's talk about John Montgomery Ward.
But that's a great place to start. So Walter Champion, who's a law professor in Texas, wrote the chapter on John Montgomery Ward. And just a little bit about the book, so your viewers know how we put this together. Bob Jarvis and I had written a book in about 2015, and this is it here, and it's used in law schools, called uh, "Baseball and the Law: Cases and Materials," and it's well over 1,000 pages, and a lot of it's casebook, but about 40% of it is an encyclopedia. So unlike law school textbooks where they ask questions after the case is given, we give detailed histories of law cases and tie it into baseball law. We were very fortunate. The book received the 2017 one of the Sabre Research Awards. And that was a thrill in and of itself because I got to go to New York for the award that week. And I met my hero, John Thorne. I remember walking into the room with my wife and saying, "Oh my goodness, that's John Thorne." My wife had no idea who I was talking about, and I now communicate with John Thorne fairly regularly, and he's such an approachable guy. But for me, he's like on the Mount Rushmore of baseball. If there was a figure to say is the figure for baseball historians that everybody would love to aspire to be, it's certainly John Thorne. So went to New York, got this wonderful award. Just felt great about it. And when we finished the book, Bob said to me, Professor Jarvis said to me, "What do you want to do next?" I said, "I got an idea. I've already started researching. Do you know how many attorneys are in the Baseball Hall of Fame?" And he's a Yankee fan, so we'll excuse him for his ignorance. Um, and he said, "No, how many?" And I said, "Well, why don't you guess? We played the guessing game. Now you can't play the guessing game once the book is out and you can get the answer." So we played the guessing game, and the answer was 11. And he said, "That's remarkable. What do you want to do with it?" And I told him, "I want to do a book, and I want to write about the attorneys that are in the Baseball Hall of Fame, but I don't want to write about their baseball careers because every one of them have biographies. Let's concentrate on their legal careers and how the intersection of law and baseball shaped both their legal careers and their baseball careers." And he loved the idea, and he goes, "I don't have time to do it. So you should do it yourself." And I said, "Well, Bob, I don't have time to do it. I'm a full-time judge. I can't write this book myself. I got real responsibilities during the day, and I only have so much time on the weekend." So we left it on the shelf. And about 3 years ago, we talk all the time. And he goes, "You still want to do that baseball book about attorneys?" And I go, "Yes." So Bob reached out to our publisher, MacPhail, wrote an abstract, what we wanted to do. And they said, "Yes, we love this idea, do the book," which left us with how we're going to write the book. So we drafted some of the finest legal baseball people we could find across the United States who were known to have a great reputation in law, but also had some baseball leanings. And there's 10 of us, including Bob and myself, and everybody got a chapter to write. And Bob and I wrote the first chapter together, and then everybody else we all wrote individual chapters. So that's how the book came together. And I'm very proud of it because when you read the book, it really reads in one voice. And by that I mean is every chapter flows the same way. And that's to Professor Jarvis's credit because he set up a rubric for us. This is how we should write each chapter, and this is how we should do our footnotes. And then it came in, and then I did the editing on does it flow? Does it read like a baseball story? Does it read like a good biography reads? Or do we? And so we put it together. The book was going to come out right after the World Series, but we got it in very early, and MacPhail loved the book, so they published it right after the All-Star game. And it's a fun run. We were very fortunate. For many months. It was the number one sports law related book, both in paperback and in Kindle. And it's just been a fun run, and we've been able to speak to great folks like Jeff and you, Leonard, to talk about the book and explore this intersection. And you don't have to be a lawyer to like it because if you like baseball or if you're a historian, and it's just kind of so that's where the book came from. So we've got about 250 book pages, and in the back of the book we have members of the bar who aren't in the Hall of Fame who are attorneys, and one I know you'll both embrace is Don Clendenin.
Mm-hmm.
And Don Clendenin did not go to law school until he finished his career in baseball. And then he went to Duquesne in Pennsylvania, and then he went out and he practiced law in South Dakota. So there's a New York Met
Yeah.
connection for you guys. So we can start with John Montgomery Ward. What's interesting about John Montgomery Ward, he was born in 1860, which would make him the oldest attorney in the Baseball Hall of Fame. So you would think, well, if he's the oldest attorney in the Baseball Hall of Fame, surely he's one of the first attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Not so. He's not. He doesn't get in until 1964. And we can talk, and the reason that the 25-word answer is why he didn't get it until 1964, because he died in 1925, is that people were still upset with him because he formed the first players union, and he formed the players league. And it took all those years for people to finally say, okay, we're going to let him in. And he was also when you read the chapter, you'll see that not a lot of people liked him. I think that's a nice way of putting it. That he wasn't going to win a popularity contest. Professor Champion kind of goes over that in the chapter. But he founded the first baseball players union in 1885, and a few years later he founds the Players League in 1890. And as you pointed out, he was in fact a two-way player. And just to give you a quick summarize, he, of all of the attorneys that are in the Baseball Hall of Fame, truly was a practitioner of the art of being an attorney. He was an accomplished an attorney. He was in private practice for 10 years. He was admitted to the New York bar, and that was where he practiced. His baseball historians will tell you that he ranks as one of the best players in the history of the game. We can't see him play because we have no videos of him, so we can only go by accounts for what historians have told us. He got his law degree from Columbia University, which I'll get to in a minute as to why that's astounding, but he spoke 5 languages. He spoke English, he spoke French, he spoke Italian, he spoke German, and he spoke Latin. So I'm going to lead with the conclusion from Professor Champion, and this is what he said about him. Quote, "Those who spend any time studying Ward's life never fail to mention that Ward was an arrogant jerk." Not my words. It's in the book. That's on page 96 in the book, and that's from Professor Champion, who himself is an author of a baseball law book that's used in law schools, and also the author of a book called Sports Law in a Nutshell. So, the story of how does John Montgomery Ward, the ball player, become an attorney? We have to go back to early baseball. And before baseball, he was a salesman. He was signed as a pitcher in 1878 to pitch for the Providence Grays, which was a brand new National League team. And a couple of years later, I think it was 1882, he gets traded to the New York Gothams. But he doesn't want to go to New York. He likes where he's living because it's where he's living. He tries to fight it. He can't. He goes to law school. He goes to New York. And while in New York, it's, I need to figure out how to beat these guys. So he enrolls in Columbia Law School, and he gets his degree at Columbia. If he doesn't get traded to the Gothams, John Montgomery Ward may be better known as a great ball player, but nothing as a lawyer. After he graduates in 1885 with his law degree, he then sets sail to he organizes the Brotherhood of Professional Baseball Players. That is the very first union of baseball players. And we're not talking early 1900s, we're talking 1885. And, but their campaign was to get rid of the reserve clause. And so I know your viewers understand, but I'll just go over it in case we have some folks that are watching that don't know what a reserve clause is. It basically says that here's a 1-year contract, and you'll work for this team for 1 year. And at the end of the year, we reserve the fact that we can sign you for another year and another year and another year. And the only really way you could get out of that is to get out of baseball for a year or so and then sign with someone else. So it's effectively binding that person. And if you read Curt Flood's letter to Bowie Kuhn that he wrote on Christmas Eve in the 1970s, telling Commissioner Kuhn that he feels like he's an indentured servant, so to speak, this was an area players wanted to be able to make contracts with who they wanted to work for. can you imagine? I talk to my law students. I teach a class called Law and the Business of Baseball. I've been doing that for almost 20 years at Mitchell Hamlin. And I begin my every year asking my students, can you imagine graduating law school, getting drafted to a law firm, practicing in an area that you never wanted to practice in, and then being told you can't leave? How many of you would go to law school knowing that? No one raises their hand. And that's what was going on. That's what John Montgomery Ward was trying to do. Now, the short story is he was unsuccessful. But with all good stories, you have to have a beginning. And just like, I guess, water dripping on a rock, eventually, if enough water slowly drips on that rock, you're going to crack the rock. So you have to literally fast forward to many, many years later, 100 years later, where finally the rock cracks and the rock cracks, and finally what John Montgomery Ward envisioned has become a reality in baseball. As his career went on as a lawyer, so the Players League eventually fails because they don't have stadiums of their own, and they were offering inflated prices to pay for baseball players. So Leonard, if you were a shortstop, and Jeff, if you were a first baseman and you were playing in the National League, the players league might have offered you $1,000 more to jump to them. And why wouldn't you jump to them for $1,000 more? But the economics of it were that the financing just wasn't there for them. And again, they didn't own their own ballparks, and they were renting the ballparks, many of the ballparks, from some of the teams that they were trying to break away from. And so it collapsed. He files a lawsuit in 1890 trying to get a preliminary injunction and force the courts to do something, and he loses there in early 1890. And again, with all the problems going on, he was unable to conduct business the way he wanted to do it. And so he becomes a very successful lawyer after his playing days. He represents the Nassau Electric Railroad, one of his biggest clients. In 1907, the Babylon considered him to be a candidate for the Republican Party judgeship. They wanted him to run for judge out in Babylon, not too far from where you guys are, and become a justice of the peace. But because he was too new to the area, they decided not to have him run and seek that position. He was a candidate to succeed Harry Pullum as president of the National League, who had committed suicide in 1909. And he was thought as the early favorite for that. But the league owners wound up voting 4-4. He, again, in the words of Professor Champion, he was an arrogant jerk. His own behavior cost him. He wound up losing because it was a 4-4 vote. And a former major league umpire by the name of Thomas Lynch was finally voted in when he became the president of the league. Interesting, when the Hall of Fame opened the first time around, he only got 3 votes. And these are the reasons why I'll go through them. This is what Professor Champion discusses in the book. The reasons that at that time he was anti-management, his activities, he had progressive politics. He challenged baseball's color line as early as 1887, and he was advocating for Black, Latin, and Native American players. Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm sorry. Let me just stop you there, because I was going to bring that up, and I bring this up from time to time. I know he tried to bring George Stovey to the New York Giants, who would have been the first African American to play in Major League Baseball after Fleetwood Walker.
Right.
And I keep saying to myself, and I told this to Len, imagine what America would have been if George Stovey was playing since the 1890s, and Jackie Robinson he wouldn't be a figure as he is now, because
Mm-hmm.
this would have happened 50 years before.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Just imagine what kind of America we would have had.
Well, so using that, so the men of the Negro leagues would have been professional ball players, or maybe
Yeah.
they would have been a third league
Right.
where it would have been an integrated league,
Hmm.
where everybody was accepted.
Right.
Sure. And then you go to Leland MacPhail's famous 1946 gentleman's agreement, where the
Hmm.
vote was 15-1
Right.
not to allow blacks to play baseball. And the only vote against that came from Branch Rickey and the Dodgers. And we
And a
know what
lawyer.
happened right after. We know what happened. And no, those are two lawyers, and they
Yeah.
butted constantly in their lives. And they're both in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
One of whom I would put on the Mount Rushmore of attorneys in the Hall of Fame, and the other I uh, wouldn't put on Mount Rushmore of attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame. But that was MacPhail.
Yeah.
Um, and another thing that annoyed people about John Montgomery Ward, because he was a gifted athlete, he became a tremendous golfer, and he
Yeah.
kind of abandoned baseball later in his life. And I think that caused a lot of people to forget um, about his baseball career. Um, One of the things he tried to do also when he was remarried in the 1890s, and he tried to have his wife allowed to become a member of his
Right.
golf club, but they wouldn't. His golf club wouldn't have it. Um, I can kind of conclude on this regarding uh, Ward. This is also from the book. It's on page it's footnote 99 from page 97 in the book. This is coming from the New York Times review of him, A Clever Baseballist, The Life and Times of John Montgomery Ward. This is it says Ward was standoffish. There exists no known likeness of him smiling. His teammates disliked him, especially when he was in charge. He was smarter than they were, and he made sure that they knew it. Ward is to be admired from afar, but he isn't someone you want to spend too much time with, either in a dressing room or in a book in your lap.
Mm.
Uh, but even though he may have been standoffish, even though he may have been the person that you might not want to invite to your party, he certainly was progressive in his thinking, wanting to have a union organized early for baseball. He wanted to have all men that were capable of playing baseball to play baseball, and he wanted men and women to be able to play sports equally, and not be cast aside. So that's a little bit about John Montgomery Ward.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn more, there's more of
There's
that when
more
that
in the
came out
book.
in the book.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Louis, you're right. He was ahead of his time. He was progressive. Whether people thought he was a jerk or not, his ideas for that time
Mm-hmm.
certainly did not merge with a lot of people. But
Oh no.
he was ahead of his time, forward thinking, and it's too bad we didn't have, many more like him because as much as they said he was a jerk, he, like Jeff said, he was, a visionary. And if he had gotten his way and baseball had been integrated then, things would be much different. Uh, you know, Today, I mean, we would not, right. The African American ball players who, Josh Gibson
I
and
was just
I
about to
mean,
mention Josh Gibson, right? Who would have had more home runs, him or Ruth?
Right.
right. It may have been Josh Gibson,
Right.
you know,
Absolutely.
uh, from everything you read and hear, it may have been, Oscar Charleston would be one of the leaders in baseball
Mhm.
because even though they integrated the stats, it's still, they it would have been much better. The game, it's a shame, but that's why Jeff and I though are such fans of his. From everything we've seen, and when you go to his grave, there is nothing identifying him as nothing like as a baseball player,
No,
Uh-huh.
nothing.
a
Nothing.
Hall of Famer,
Nothing.
nothing. Now,
Just a
obviously, he
stone with
passed
his
away.
name.
Say that again, Jeff.
It was just a stone with
Right.
his name.
Yeah. Now, obviously, when he passed away and the stone was done, he
Hmm.
wasn't in the Hall of Fame,
Right.
but he had this baseball career. Uh, and, but, and later on, they could have done something, but they didn't. There is nothing, if you don't know who he is and where he's buried, you would have no
No
idea.
idea.
Yeah. But we did go visit. And Jeff, didn't you leave something at his grave, like a baseball or something? No?
No, no,
When we went, I thought you left something, but
no.
no, we should do that next time.
Yes,
You know, like
yes.
when you go to Babe Ruth's grave and Lou Gehrig's grave, when you go to, that cemetery.
Right.
Have you been there?
No, I'm not the last time I went to the cemetery was to say hi to my mom and dad.
Mm.
Gotcha. Well, when you go to that cemetery, and we went there, it had snowed, and there were piles of baseballs under the snow. They
Uh-huh.
just, people leave baseballs and hats and notes, and it's incredible. But nothing at John Montgomery Ward's indicating that his greatness.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's a shame, but anyway, you did a great job in the book
Thank you.
with him,
I'll tell
and
Professor Champion you said so. I'm just
no,
reliving
that is
Professor
yes.
Champion's words.
Well, you definitely did him proud, Professor Champion. Um, the next one that we'd like to dive into, deeper is Bowie Kuhn,
Okay.
who interesting about Bowie Kuhn is he also I don't know was such a well liked person, but
Well,
you know,
before
the,
before we start talking about Bowie Kuhn,
go ahead.
let me just preface this by saying, back in the '70s when they were having all the, with Marvin Miller and the free agencies, and I was a teenager who just loved baseball, and it was the management versus the players, and every day on the back pages of the Daily News was a picture of Marvin Miller and how the players are going to strike. And I just hated Marvin Miller. Now, growing up, I understand now. I understand what he was doing. I get more,
Hmm.
back then I was a kid. I just wanted him to play baseball. And,
Right.
and, and Bowie Kuhn was, I mean, what an adversary to Marvin Miller. And the more you learn about this, and I did as I was, getting older and more mature, you find out that Bowie Kuhn, wow, wasn't a good commissioner, was he?
Well, it's funny. It's funny you say that. So the chapter about Bowie Kuhn is written by Elizabeth Manriquez, a law professor. And let me try to start off with one of the things that she said. All right. And I'm quoting from Professor Manriquez now. All right. Here's what she said. Kuhn had been a partner in the New York law firm of Wilkie Farr and Gallagher. Because the firm represented the National League, Kuhn began the job of commissioner better equipped than any of his predecessors. Yet, as matters turned out, Kuhn was ill-equipped for his new position. By the time he was shown the door, he had become one of the most polarizing figures in baseball history.
Hmm.
Those are the words of my co-author, Elizabeth Manriquez. And she nailed this chapter as well. And the amount of research that she put into this chapter is just absolutely mind-boggling. Just absolutely mind-boggling. So I want to start there because unlike unlike John Montgomery Ward or Tony La Russa, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, right? You said La Russa was the third
Yes,
person you wanted.
yes.
Okay, Bowie Kuhn never played baseball. However, he was a scoreboard boy for the Washington Senators as a kid growing up, and we'll talk about
Right.
that. That's as
Said that
close as he got to the field.
said that was his best job ever. It
And
was
that's
his
what he said. And
favorite.
maybe, yeah, maybe he should have stayed there. I don't know. But he had so many opportunities to do the right thing. I think that's another quote of hers from the book that he basically had all these opportunities, and every time he was given an opportunity, he picked the wrong one. I mean, if your choice is A or B, and you're always picking the wrong one of the two, it's bad luck. So anyway, I don't know if you had a chance. Have any of you read his book, Bowie Kuhn, The Education of a Baseball Commissioner?
I have a long time ago. It was called Hard. Wasn't it called
Yeah, it
Hardball?
was called
Yes.
Hardball, The
Yeah.
Education of a Baseball
Yes.
Commissioner.
Yes. A long time ago.
What do you think of that book?
I thought it was very interesting. I mean, yeah, I mean, all his what he says it was his accomplishments really wasn't an accomplishment. I
Right.
mean,
So, he writes when you read someone's autobiography, it's not really written with a real critical eye.
Right, right.
So yeah, that's what that's kind of where that book went. It was a great puff piece
Hmm.
on his life. Now, the good news about Kuhn, a real smart guy. He was as a young man, he went to Franklin Marshall College. He was in the Navy, where they called it the V-12 program. Uh, he loved sports, but he lacked athletic ability. He failed to make the baseball team, the basketball team, or the football team. He wanted any one of those, but he didn't make them. Um, but he was a gifted man. He was brilliant. Okay. Uh, at the University of Virginia School of Law, he was the associate's decision editor. And this is where, if you go back, and we're going to go back now in history, that's 75, 76 years ago, he wrote a piece. You read it, you might think it was written today by some people, but he wrote a law review article called "The Right of a Newsman to Refrain from Divulging the Sources of His Information." So when you see that, you would think, okay, what is it going to tell us? But what he basically says in this decision is that I'll read his words. He wrote, this writer does not believe that newspaper confidence statutes are warranted or justifiable. What he's saying there is that the same kind of issue that we just saw the other day with that there's a reason that newspapers that reporters have had certain rights. He was advocating that the rights of certain reporters should be shrunk, and this was 76 years ago that he wrote it. Um, um, Elizabeth Manriquez says it was the right time for the wrong person, and I'll give you some examples that not she cites too in the textbook. In 1965, for example, Bill Eckert's unanimously elected as the baseball's fourth commissioner, and with Happy Chandler and Happy Chandler's background, University of Kentucky law, he was a senator and a governor. Eckert, like Chandler, kind of quickly lost the confidence and the support of the owners. And in 1968, there's this opening, and a search begins. Well, who's going to replace them? So we kind of have back to back commissioners that aren't good. We're not going to talk so much about Landis. Landis did a lot of things right, but he did a lot of things wrong. He had the opportunity to integrate baseball, and he refused to do it. He had some ethical problems as a judge that we talk about in depth in the book, and it's because of Landis that there's a code of professionalism for judges that the ABA passed when he wouldn't do certain things. But we have back-to-back bad commissioners, and so there's a move to replace him, which then gets us to why do we get to Bowie Kuhn? He then becomes the favorite because MacPhail, who at that time was involved with the Expos, takes himself out of the running. Kuhn says something to him, hey, you got this team, you really shouldn't leave it. And then, of course, it becomes enter Bowie Kuhn. So Bowie Kuhn steps in because of his background. He was representing the National League in litigation. But let's take you back to his childhood now. I've just taken you up until the point where he becomes commissioner, but kind of let's take the lens back a little bit to see him growing up. He grew up, he went to public schools. He wasn't a kid that was wealthy. He went to public schools. I mentioned before that as a teenager, he spent his summers at Griffin Stadium as a scoreboard boy, I think is what they called him. And he got about $1 a game to sit out in the scoreboard. And we all know what that is. All you have to do is you go to Fenway or you go to Wrigley, and they got the people out there changing the score manually. That's what he did. He enters the Navy program when he gets out of school, and he's trained, and he spends several years in the Navy. Again, I told you he was brilliant. And before he went to the University of Virginia Law School, which is one of the top law schools in this country, I myself didn't go to the University of Virginia. I went to, at the time, was Hamlin. Now it's Mitchell Hamlin in St. Paul. But he graduates in the 1947 from Princeton with honors in economics. He goes to the University of Virginia, and I told you he writes this piece that I quoted on the Shield Law, and Elizabeth Manriquez, who's at the University of Wisconsin School of Law, she's their head law librarian. She also says today every U.S. jurisdiction except Wyoming has a reporter shield laws, and he was advocating that there shouldn't be such a law. He graduates from the University of Virginia in 1950. He passes the bar exam, and he gets his first job. He working for the Wilkie firm. They're paying him $4,000 a year, which is about $52,000 a year in today's dollars. He goes to work with them. Now, that firm that he went to work for, they had been representing the National League since 1933. He wanted to work in baseball, and so he set his sights with the great law with his great law school, with his great grades in law school, and his ability to communicate. He lands a job there. And ironically, he gets assigned to Toulson versus New York Yankees. Toulson versus New York Yankees is the second case in the baseball trilogy regarding the reserve clause. And we talked about the reserve clause a few minutes ago with John Montgomery Ward. The first case is Baltimore versus Federal Baseball from 1921-22. I think it was 1921. This is the second case. And Toulson, who was a player for the Yankees, and basically he tried to challenge the longstanding exemption. Bowie Kuhn was on the right side of this as far as the U.S. Supreme Court, because they said in a short, it was stare decisis that there's nothing that's changed from 1922 to the 1950s, so we're going to keep it there. So that's his first taste of real baseball litigation as an attorney. After Toulson, he starts working on a lot of baseball matters. In 1956, his alumni newsletter from Princeton says that, quote, Bowie Kuhn is the best informed member of the class on baseball. Bowie is a Wall Street lawyer, and that's his reputation. He's doing so well at the firm. In the early 60s, they promote him to a partner, and then he gets involved in litigation. I'll take you we'll go out to Milwaukee. And you and we remember the Milwaukee Braves. The three of us remember the Milwaukee Braves. At least I remember the Milwaukee Braves. Okay. And he gets involved in that case. So for the viewers that don't know what happened in Milwaukee in 1964, Milwaukee had the Braves, which were going to become the Atlanta Braves. They wanted to move to Atlanta. They had 1 year left on their lease, and a lawsuit was filed. And the bottom line on that lawsuit was that they couldn't leave until their lease was over. So they were forced to spend 1 more year in Milwaukee with miserable attendance. And one of my former law clerks did a program for us this past summer on that whole case. His name is Ben Myers, and he's a prosecutor now in Wisconsin, and he actually helped assisted me on some of the research in my chapter on Tony, but he did a great program on this. So the bottom line on this, the most interesting part of this is that during the trial, Bowie Kuhn cross-examines a guy by the name of Bud Selig.
Yeah.
1966. course, Bud Selig becomes a commissioner of baseball, but
Mm-hmm.
at that time they were on opposite sides. So some of the things that went wrong during Bowie Kuhn's tenure. February 69, he's hired. He's hired at a salary of $100,000 a year.
Half of what he was making with the law firm. He gave up half his salary to take that position. So he either knew that something was going to develop from it, or he loved baseball so much and wanted to be a part of it that he took half his salary.
I don't think it's unusual if somebody, $100,000 was an awful lot of money in
Oh
1960.
yeah, absolutely. But he was making 200,000.
And he may have felt that I can live on less because
Right.
less at that time, $100,000 was certainly a heck of a lot of money. And there's only one Major League Baseball commissioner. There's only one person like that on the entire planet.
Right.
And so he took it. He got paid more. I mean, he got paid more than Eckert got paid. But as you're saying, yes, it was $100,000 less than he was making. So at 42 years old, he becomes the youngest commissioner in the history of baseball. He's going to stay there for 15 years. The economics of baseball did improve, but football overtook baseball during that time period as America's favorite sport. His tenure was, to say the least, tumultuous. Increasing litigation, hostility between the sports, the players, and the owners, and he couldn't keep all the wheels on. In 1969, baseball adds 4 new teams: the Royals, the Expos, the Padres, and the Pilots. And we know that we talked about Milwaukee a minute ago. Well, we know that when the vacuum of the Pilots not being able to do what they did in Seattle with a week's notice, they're back in Milwaukee, and they're playing again. That's in 1970. And wouldn't you know, the guy that he cross-examined a few years earlier, Selig,
Mm-hmm.
he purchases the Pilots out of bankruptcy. He moves them to Milwaukee, and presto, we got baseball back in Milwaukee after a few years. There's a minor lawsuit at the time that's not very well publicized, but it's not much talked about today, out of the Southern District of New York, where some umpires tried to unionize, and they got fired for unionizing. Then we have the whole Curt Flood
Mm-hmm.
thing. Even though he kind of wins the battle with Curt Flood, the free agency is starting to disintegrate. He suspends Denny McLain due to his involvement with bookmakers during the 67 season.
One of the grave injustices, I'm not, maybe that's not the right word, but what he did wrong was Hank Aaron hitting number 714 and 715, and he doesn't show up.
Right.
He has some other engagement and just doesn't show up at that historical event in baseball history.
And how about Mantle and Mays?
Mantle and Mays also, right?
Suspending them because they were greeters at a casino.
That's right.
And then I watched the news today. I read earlier today. So today, for those watching, is January 15th. We've got a scandal involving NCAA basketball players.
Mm-hmm.
Does it surprise you that with the more and more, now that gambling's even legal, that we're going to have this issue? So we go back to baseball's very first commissioner. No matter what you think about him on some of the other things, he put an end, at least at that point in time, with the Black Sox scandal. And he brought, but for Judge Landis, baseball may have just totally collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
Because he demanded to be the czar. He demanded to have all this power, and he did certain things that certainly today maybe a commissioner couldn't do. So
And
yeah,
didn't Landis say something about the best interest of baseball, and then Bowie Kuhn uses that?
right. Well, of course. And then you have the chaos of Jim Bouton,
Yeah.
one of the former Yankee and the former Seattle Pilot who writes Ball 4. And for the first time, we get to peek into the clubhouse, and they talk about drug use and womanizing. And of course, it sets Kuhn off because, as we know, in earlier years, sports writers used to ride the trains with the ball players, and they ignored what they saw. They ignored the drinking or the womanizing or whatever else was going on. And now Jim Bouton says, "No, I'm going to start writing about this." And Kuhn gets upset. And today, Ball Four is probably considered uh, one of the greatest sports books ever published. If you're going to, the young baseball fan wants to, they learn about the history of baseball. I think one of the books you give him or her is read Ball Four.
Isn't that in the Library of Congress too? Uh, the question is, why did he get in the Hall of Fame?
Well, I'm not a voter. I don't have a vote. I mean, we can go through some of the other things. In 1972, you got baseball's first work stoppages.
Right.
In 73, owners have a lockout. 76, there's another lockout. 80, the players strike. 81, the players strike. I mean, between 72 and 81, there's 5 work stoppages.
Right.
There's five work stoppages.
Yeah.
Uh,
And give but Sealy, who I didn't think was a very good commission, give him credit because I don't think there was any during his tenure.
But a lot of folks think Bud Selig, but they've asked me, Bud Selig was, I don't know what's going to happen with Bud Selig. He's not an attorney, so he wouldn't be in the next book if there's another attorney. But as you mentioned, yes, when Hank Aaron was getting ready to hit number 714 and 715, he was vapor in the building.
Yeah.
How about the fights that he had with Steinbrenner?
Mhm.
Constantly fighting with Steinbrenner. And then, of course, the Andy Messerschmitt, Dave McNally issue, where Peter Seitz struck down baseball's reserve clause in December of 75. And then free agency de facto becomes part of baseball. This is all on Bowie Kuhn's watch.
Sure.
And then you had the fight with he won this fight with Charles Finley when Finley in June of 76 wanted to get rid of Joe Rudy and Raleigh Fingers and Viter Blue. He stepped in and said, no, this is not in the best interest of baseball. And the courts upheld and affirmed his decision because he was in charge of that. And it probably was a very good decision. Another bit of chaos was when he banned my good friend Melissa Ludke from going into the locker room, even though the Yankees and the Dodgers had no problem. And so she filed suit in New York. And if you want to read a great book, another book that I would recommend if you want to learn baseball history is the one that Melissa published about a year and a half ago called Locker Room Talk. She'd be a great guest for you. Rutgers University Press. And it's her story and her battle for equal access for reporters. And she broke the ceiling for women to have the same access that any other male reporter had. And she talks about this story of how it came to be and her love for the game of baseball. So as far as so after we'll go after real quick. So Bowie Kuhn leaves, and Peter Ueberroth, who replaced him, this is his quote: "The institution baseball was a disaster in all ways when I arrived. It was a scandal-ridden, drug-ridden thing." That's the guy that replaced Bowie Kuhn. Now you ask, he wanted a third term, and the owners weren't going to give it to him. When he passed away, Murray Chass wrote, and I'm quoting now, "He never did anything enlightening. He never did anything that anticipated the future." And then Elizabeth Manrique on page 166 of the book, she writes, "As would be the case so often in his later life, Kuhn turned out to be on the wrong side of history." That's an important quote. And so that's kind of the story of Bowie Kuhn. I think he went into it. If you take a look, he went into it for the right reasons. He loved baseball. He loved the game of baseball, just like us growing up as kids. I grew up a Met fan. You guys grew up the same way,
Yeah.
except I grew up, so now I'm a Marlins fan. But but we still have this love of the game. I'd still be a Mets fan if the '69 Mets were still playing, but
Sure.
but they're not. Um, but he had a love of the game, and he understood the game very well. He just made very poor decisions when it came to I think the overall understanding of the game. Had he given in to the Union, and I don't mean surrendered, but if he had truly given in to the Union, we wouldn't have had these eras of baseball where players just despise the owners. Had he given in, it would have been, I wouldn't say seamless, but certainly not the anarchy that we observed during
Yeah, he
that
needed
era.
a better relationship with the union. I mean, it didn't have to be animosity. It didn't have to be
Mhm.
headbutting. It could have been more of a partnership, more of a type of going forward, doing things for what's betterment of the game, and not
Mhm.
just militant on both sides. It was just
Right.
terrible. But yeah, so that was Bowie Kuhn, and let's move on to Tony La Russa, who
Uh-huh.
who's written this chapter's written by someone very personal to you, isn't it?
Yeah, I wrote this chapter,
Right.
proving to my friends that I knew how to write things more than granted or denied on an order. Um, and I have written a bunch of Sabre stories over the years. A lot of them are about some of the best games that the Marlins ever played. So we're talking about three, maybe four games. A few years ago when Sabre was in South Florida for the annual meeting, I wrote a piece in the Sabre Journal for the convention on baseball and the law in Florida and the history of baseball law cases in the state of Florida. But this got me interested because Tony La Russa is the only member of the Baseball Hall of Fame who's living,
Yeah.
which presents a major problem if you're an historian. When you're researching someone that's passed away, there's ways to do it. But when you're still researching somebody that is alive and still making history and still doing things, it's a lot more difficult because Tony himself has written about, there's been about 3 or 4 books written about Tony. But what I had the advantage of, which was great, is that I was able to speak to people kind of like you would do a Sports Illustrated story. And when I started writing this, I have a degree in journalism, and so I worked for the Yankees for 2 years as a kid in 1975 and 1976 in their public relations department in Fort Lauderdale, and I wanted to write this as if it was a contemporary Sports Illustrated article. Now I know Sports Illustrated isn't what it was when I was growing up, or we were all
Yeah.
growing up, but I wanted to kind of write it that way where still staying in the guidelines that Professor Jarvis gave us, but I had the advantage to talk to people that were still alive. So I was able to seek out people that, as a coincidence, we both knew. Professor Earhart, Florida State University School of Law professor, and I have taught in the same programs. I used to be the academic dean for Florida Judicial College, and he was a faculty member. And we've taught on the same programs, but never together, but on the same, as part of the same faculty. So I was able to talk to him in depth. Scott Tosian, who was a classmate of Tony's, who I've known, who does ethics, who's an ethics expert in Florida, he was able to talk to me about Tony. I reached out to somebody I didn't know, which was a guy by the name of Bill Dooley. Bill Dooley was the lawyer who hired Tony to go work for him on the west coast of Florida. I was able to speak to Mike Veck, son of Bill Veck, and Mike is a friend of mine. And I met Mike because of my teaching in St. Paul at Mitchell Hamlin Law School doing my baseball class, and we use CHS Field where Mike used to be part owner of the Saints, and he would come in and talk to my class every summer. And we've just maintained friendships. And when I got ready to do this chapter, I reached out to Mike, and he gave me insight that I've never had before. And I talked to a gentleman by the name of Robin Fusion. Robin was a journeyman pitcher, AAA pitcher, pitched in the Mexican League and came within a quarter of an inch of getting called up for the season at the end of spring training, only to be told on the last day, unfortunately, they were letting him go. So what does that have to do with it? He was on a pitching staff as a coach in spring training where Tony La Russa was in charge, and Tony's the one that encouraged him to go to law school. And I've become friends with Robin. When I became friends with Robin, I didn't realize he had that relationship. But when I realized that, I reached out to Robin for information. And last, I spoke with Tony himself, who could not have been nicer. And my first phone conversation with him was hi, and the phone call was arranged through a mutual friend who said, "Yeah, he'll take your phone call." And I started off with, "Hello, Mr. La Russa," and his response was, "That was my father. Call me Tony." And that just kind of like said to me, he's a real decent guy, you know. And the great part about the first conversation I had with him, it was during spring training. And in the background, you can hear what sounds like a spring training game going on in Arizona because he's working for the White Sox as a special advisor. And I guess I caught him in the seventh or eighth inning because he said to me something to the effect, "Lou, give me a minute here. They're changing players and I'm taking notes." So while this game is going on, our first conversation, he's talking to me about baseball and his life and law school and things like that. So I just found him to be a great man, and very humble. Um, and so not everything in the book is hearts and flowers because we have to write about a couple of difficult things that happened in his life, and it's in the book. And I remember when he knows it's there, and he said, "Yeah, that's my life story. That's the way it is. When I can't hide it." And so that's the difference between writing about a person that's alive and writing about a person that's not alive, because you're still writing about a person, and
Still
there are
more
people.
history to come.
And there's more history, and there's obviously more history to come. So why does he go to law school? So let's talk about, I guess, Tony as a kid. He, his first language was Spanish. Most people don't realize that. Some people think the name is Italian, but both parents are Spanish. His mom and dad met in a cigar factory in Ybor City, which is in the Tampa area. That's how they met. Um, Uh, well, let me tell you about his accomplishments first, and then we'll talk
Okay.
about how law played into it. Uh, if you go back to the Tony La Russa at age 18, people thought that he could become a Hall of Fame baseball player because he was signed as a bonus baby. And for the viewers who don't understand bonus babies, they're kind of like Rule 5 players in the sense that once they're signed, they have to stay with a major league club for the year. So he was such a gifted athlete that the A's signed him and he played for the entire year. Not a great season because when you're 18 years old, what kind of season are you kind of going to have? Harmon Killebrew was another bonus baby. Uh, we know the results, and they came on about the same time. I think Killebrew was a little bit earlier, but he became a Hall of Famer. So Tony signed as an 18-year-old kid, and here's the foresight. He signed out of high school. He got a car, but his mother and father made sure that there was enough money set aside so he can go to college. So that was part of the deal. We need money for him to go to college because there's going to come a time where maybe he won't be in baseball. He hurts himself while he's playing ball. And the end of the story is he's manager of the year 4 times. He wins the World Series, and he wins the World Series in '89 and 2006 and 2011. And so that's the end of the story. Okay. But now let's talk about all the middle of the story. Why does he become a lawyer? He becomes a lawyer, he becomes a lawyer because um, his major league career is not going to pan out because he injured himself playing pickup ball. Comes home, plays pickup ball, hurts himself. He's never the same. Just never the same. He tries. Um, Signed in 1962. It's a great story. It's front page headlines of the Tampa Bay papers. This is really big news. Everybody loves him. Everybody loves his family. This family has been there for a generation or two. But a fact you don't know, how many stolen bases did Tony have in his major league career?
No clue.
Lenny, how many?
I'm going to fathom a guess. 0.
Correct. That's right. 0. And the irony of it, in the last major league game he ever played, what was he asked to do?
He was asked to pinch run.
That's correct. And what did he wind up doing?
He got thrown out.
No, he scored the winning run as a
Oh,
pinch runner.
all right.
All
Well,
right.
I
So
was hey,
you were close. You know,
the
2 out of
streak.
3. What's the Meatloaf song? 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right?
Right, exactly.
Plus 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So I mean, he that's how he finishes his career as a pinch runner, a guy who never stole a base, but he scored the winning run. Here's what he told me. This is like the greatest advice that a parent can give a child. And what the greatest thing that a child can say to a parent. And this was also true of a couple of other people that are in the Hall of Fame that promised their parents they would go to law school, but then promised their parents, I'm never going to practice law. I want to stay in baseball. But that's another story for another day. He promised his mom, okay? Promising your mom means you must complete that promise, okay? He says to his mom, I'm going to get an education. Tony said that if he didn't play baseball, if he didn't manage, he would have become a courtroom lawyer. He wanted to be a trial lawyer because I asked him, what lessons did he learn? And he said to me, as a law student, that translated to being a manager. And he said, you can't shoot from the hip, as you have to value preparation. And you always have to pay attention to detail. Winning or losing a case or winning or losing a ball game starts with preparation and paying attention to each detail of what you need to accomplish. Right after our book got published, there was an interview that was published by the National Hall of Fame, an interview, and he talked about how he managed games in half-inning increments. And I think that's kind of what he's talking to me about here, how he would prepare. When he realized his playing days were over, he said to me, that's when I began to see the handwriting on the wall. I was getting to the end of my career and I was not making very much money and I was stuck in AAA ball. He told me that he decided to take the LSAT because he said, and this is his quote, I've always read a lot and things like contract disputes and labor problems always interested me. I also have a lot of friends who were lawyers at the time and we talked. So I just decided, all right, I'll do it. Although I didn't know how I was going to do it. So at the time that he went to law school, there were about 5 law schools in Florida. It was Florida State, it was University of Florida, University of Miami, Stetson, and Nova Southeastern and the University of Miami. He was accepted by all the law schools. So the question is, well, why did he choose Florida State when he was from the Tampa area and right in St. Petersburg was
I know. I know. Wait, you want me to guess this?
Go ahead, tell everybody. Why did he FSU?
I read the book, but
Yeah.
they were the only ones willing to accommodate his baseball schedule, so he was able to go to law school during the winter sessions and I guess winter and fall.
So yeah, at that time, Florida used to have what's called the quarter system, and the quarter system, you had to go to three of the 4 quarters a year. Instead of having semesters, there were 10-week sessions. And so these 10-week sessions blended better. So he was able to complete it. So he would start law school. He would go from he would go from January to basically March or so. He was able to do it in a better way, where some of the other schools, like the University of Miami, had a semester system. Stetson had a semester system. The state schools and Nova had a semester system, but the state schools, Florida and Florida State, had the quarter system. Shorter time period, he was able to complete and get the classes done. It took him 5 years to do this, which was the ABA standard. Some of the teachers may have turned a blind eye on the fact that he may have been missing part of one of the quarters when baseball started up, but he always got his work done. Again, this is 50 years ago. So he always got his work done. And according to Scott Tosian, who was his classmate, and Scott told me that Tony would outwork everybody else, that there was nobody that worked harder than Tony. And I had a lot to do, I think, with the fact that at the time that he was going to law school, he was married with young kids, and he was there on his own dime, as opposed to mom and dad saying, "Oh, that's a great idea. We're going to send you to law school." So his motivation was, I'm going to go to law school, but I'm still playing ball. He was still playing ball at the time, but he recognized that the career is coming to an end. So when he starts, he's still a AAA player. By the time he graduates, he's managing. Professor Earhart was his evidence professor. In 1977, he arranged for Tony to become a clerk at the U.S. Court of Appeals in New Orleans while Tony was still playing for the Pelicans. But because of obvious scheduling issues and baseball, he was just unable to take that clerkship. And then at the end of the 77 baseball season, he was getting ready to graduate law school. Earhart sat him down. Professor Earhart sat him down and said, "What are you going to do when you graduate? What are you going to do now?" And he said to him, again, fatherly advice, basically, "Listen, whatever you do, make sure you take the bar exam, because you always have to leave your options open to practice law." So that's what he did. And Tony wrote in his biography, One Last Strike, he wrote, "I wasn't a brilliant student, but because, and others have said he was a brilliant student, that he was being humble here. I wasn't a brilliant student, but because I was competitive and went to law school with a couple of friends who started with better grades than me, I studied harder." He graduated FSU with honors. So as he's going through this, he's coaching. So how does he become a manager? So there's a story out there, and it's been written and rewritten, but it's a false narrative. The narrative is the only reason that Bill Veeck hired Tony to manage at any level is because he got him inexpensively. I spoke with Mike, and I said, "This is the story. What do you know?" And Mike told me the story. He goes, "This is the first time I'm really talking about this to anybody." Because I was there. And for those of the viewers, Mike Veeck is a great documentary that's worth watching called The Saint of Second Chances.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It was nominated for an Emmy Award. And again, if somebody's saying, "What do I need to do to learn about baseball?" Watch the Mike Veeck documentary. He's also famous for Disco Demolition Night, where his own father fired him shortly thereafter. And you can look that up as well. But when I spoke to Mike about Tony and I questioned him about things, he said to me, he was hired because his father was intrigued by the fact that Tony was a law student at the time. And he said to me, and this is his quote, "My dad signed Tony on a hunch, feeling that his commitment to the study of law would make him a detailed-oriented manager. And he found that Tony was an intellect." Finally, he passes the bar exam and he's managing in Chicago. And there's a great interview that you can find on YouTube. It's in the book. You could click it, type it in, where Harry Carey is interviewing before a game on August 22nd. And he comments And here's the manager, and then he just graduated from law school today. Well, he didn't graduate from law school that day. He was sworn in. He was sworn in by a judge who was his name was Abraham Lincoln Moravitz. There's a great story about him, and I'll tell you in a minute. And Ben, who was my research assistant, dug so deep. And I said to Ben when he was doing this research, Ben, we're not doing a story about Judge Moravitz. We're doing a story about Tony. But he found this. I'll tell you the story in a second. Tony says no. He goes along with the fact that the Harry Carey thinks he was just graduated law school, but in fact he was sworn in by a member of a federal judge. So why is a Jewish judge in the Northern District of Illinois called Abraham Lincoln Moravitz? Okay. And the story on that is that his mother thought that Abraham Lincoln was Jewish, and she wanted him named after who she thought was like the greatest Jewish person in the history of the United States. So that's how that judge got the name Abraham Lincoln.
We're still waiting for a Jewish president, though.
a little sidebar.
Yes.
Anyway, so he graduates. He really doesn't practice law because he had one brush with practicing law. He works for the Conley and Dooley firm out of Sarasota. He's preparing to do a case. He was with them from 1980 to 1994. He's now inactive as an attorney in Florida, which means that he could come back and practice law anytime he wants. He just has to get caught up on his continuing education and pay dues. And he was working on a case that involved a woman whose kids were trying to declare her incompetent. He was about to go to trial on it, but he had to leave for spring training, so he handed the ropes over to somebody else, and they won the case. That was as close as he ever got inside a courtroom. And then that story he told me, and Bill Dooley pretty much told me the same thing. What makes Tony a really good guy, too, is the story that I'll call him Judge, is Judge Fusion told me. He was the guy, Tony, that convinced Robin Fusion, a journeyman AAA pitcher, trying one more time to figure things out. Now I'm going to coach. But he was bright, had a degree from University of South Florida, which is where Tony got his degree also. So they had that connection in common. And Tony says to him, almost word for word, what Professor Earhart said to Tony. It never hurts. You can use your law degree for a lot of things. And so with that in mind, Robin enrolls in law school. He enrolls at Stetson because it's close to his home and he doesn't have to worry about playing ball anymore. And 25 years after becoming a criminal defense attorney in 2018, he gets elected as a in Hillsborough County as a circuit judge. One of Tony's greatest legal battles was that in 2009, somebody was impersonating him on Twitter. And he claimed that the account gave a false impression. And so a lawsuit was filed. And then that's how we get the Twitter or the X check mark that says you're
verified.
So.
Well, Lou, that's so interesting. By the way, there was a pretty good pitcher that came out of Stetson. That's Jacob deGrom. So there's one baseball connection there.
Right.
The name of the book is "Attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame: A Collection of Biographical Essays." Lou, and if you want to hear more about, read more about Tony Russa, Bowie Kuhn, John Montgomery Ward, or the other eight lawyers featured, get this book. It's fascinating. It's very interesting.
Thanks.
And it's a terrific
It's
read.
And just so folks know, it's on Amazon. If you're an Amazon Prime member, they're offering a discount right now. It's about $38 on Amazon. I think the list price is $45, and the delivery is next day delivery with free shipping. If you're a Kindle person, Amazon has it for $27, $28, and you can read it instantly.
Exactly.
If you want to get it through our publisher right now is offering a discount. I got to find the code on that for a minute. let me look what there's a code for 25 off between now and the end of the year. I probably should know that by heart, but I don't. So give me a minute and I'll tell you what it is. You can get it directly from McFarland. Let's see.
And while you're looking that up, there is a coupon price on Amazon for 31.16. So
Wow,
yeah,
31.16.
yeah.
That's close to half off, which is I know that McFarland's offering 25% off. Also, if you like what you heard tonight and you're interested in baseball and law topics, Bob and I are on X as well as Blue Sky, and you can find us under Baseball and Law at Baseball and Law on both places. And so we'd love to have you follow us. And because the internet is so slow at my house, I cannot find the discount code. I know my publisher will be very disappointed in me. But hold on. Let's see. Let's see if we can find that code another way. I think it's saved 26. But I don't want to, if I give you the wrong code and then you go do it, then I'll get letters from people saying I gave the wrong code. Preparation. I should have prepared better. But that's another story. Let's see. One last look. Yeah, here we go. Let's see if we can find it. All right, here we go. Yes, the code is SAVE26, SAVE 26. If you go to McFarland, it's a 25% off. They do charge extra for shipping. So I guess right now, if you'd like the book and you want it tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, Amazon has the best price. So
And by the way, that is posted and pinned on your X account, so it's right there as
it's
well.
right
So
there.
there you
So
go.
guys, it was a lot of fun. When you
Thank you,
come
Lou.
down for baseball, make sure you give me a call. Len,
Absolutely.
call me. We'll suffer at a ball game. I
We
wish your
thank you.
Mets. I wish your Mets well this year. I'm sorry that we knocked you out
Oh,
of the
yes.
playoffs. Nah, I'm really not sorry. I have cousins in Plainview who I come up every year or two to visit, and we saw them in October, and I was apologizing for beating them, and they understood it's the Mets.
When we saw the schedule and we saw that they were concluding with the Marlins, we
Uh,
said, "Oh, that's where they get knocked out."
Marlins always,
They
always,
own them.
But in
always beat
fairness,
them.
all you needed was one more win.
Yes.
And why would you wait for 162? You could have gotten your extra win in April. Then you
Yeah.
wouldn't have needed it in September.
It happened in
These are the Mets.
2007. It's happened in 2000. It's always the Marlins.
Yeah, well,
So,
we knocked you out that one. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
These are the
yeah,
Mets.
yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, guys. Not
It's
really.
okay.
Sorry.
Lou, thank you very much. Go
Thanks,
get
Jeff.
this book. It's very
Thanks, Larry.
interesting. And thank you very much, Lou. And be well.
Thank you.